morning. I have the pleasure to be the first one and have no voice, so apologies from yesterday night's great event here in Austria at the Hofburg. So great welcome to this second day of the International Railway Congress. So we are here a family of railway enthusiasts and that makes everybody very happy. Approximately 1,000 years of experience. Hopefully we can sort out certain things over the coming 8 hours. I work for Apex Rail. I'm one of the managing directors. We are a truly independent financial advisor and arrange rolling stock and infrastructure financing. So we do everything with respect to financing for rolling stock and infrastructure in the rail industry only. We are based in Switzerland and we shift around billions of euros into the railways. So I would like to just say a few words about the place where we are. Austria is not just a nice city, but it's also a technological hub in the railway industry. We have Siemens just around the corner building trains. We have their global bogie center in Graz. We have major construction companies of the railways, Por, Strabag, for instance, are based here in Austria, and we are right the connecting point between broad gauge and standard gauge, or we hope to become. And one of the champions is sitting right in front of me. So this is actually an important place to be, and therefore I'm welcoming our distinguished panel to the stage. Not everybody is here, obviously hangovers or whatever, we will see. But we start. Yeah? The people who arrived should be honored with an on-time start. So first I welcome Mr. Oleg Toni, Deputy CEO from RGD. Please come to the stage, find your seat. I can't welcome Mrs. Kolm. She will be late by 10 minutes, so she will sneak in. Then we have Mr. Sharapov. He is working for the Institute of Industry in Russia. I think, yeah, we start over there. You find your seats. Then we have Mr. Jang, coming fresh from Korea. Please. Sharing his views from the other side of the world. Then we have Mr. Simon Fletcher from the UIC, 40 years of railway experiences and a great talker. Then yeah, we have Dr. Li from the Chinese Bank of Commercial and Industry Development. We have Mr. Heinz Gschnitzer, who is a project manager for the railway connection 1520. And Mr. Yanni, CEO of Molinari Rail, a real technological expert. So I go and start. Yeah, please welcome the panel. I'd like to start, I mean, the format is fairly straightforward. Everybody gives a presentation. If there's time in the end, we will hopefully also find the chance to take questions from the audience. But I would like to ask Mr. Toni, the Deputy CEO of RGD, who's now almost 20 years in the management board of RGD, or at least it feels like 20 years, might be 14, my notes say. And he has seen a lot of developments by Russian railways over the last decade. And we are quite keen to find out what RGD is planning to do in terms of infrastructure development, which is our main subject, and how to bring East and West together. Mr. Toni, the floor is yours.
Спасибо.
Well, dear colleagues, good morning. I have, for many years, been a member of the board of Russian Railways for nearly 15 years, as you said, and many of the things that happened so far that will happen are things that are, say, in a way known to me. In that sense, I was lucky. Well, ours is a customer-oriented enterprise that is developing very, very dynamically, and we try to provide maximum comfort to our passengers and also to provide efficient freight transport for the economy. Of course, we want to transport as many goods as possible and at the same time to provide maximum comfort to our passengers. Of course, we want to make good money in order to be able to invest the money in the development of the existing infrastructure and its evolution in order to ensure that the various corridors, east, west, north, south, can develop. Well, Moscow is not only the capital of the Russian Federation, but it was also a huge transport hub where lots of things are happening, enormous passenger flows, enormous freight flows meet and converge there. The central Moscow transport hub is really a point that unites the connection between East and West, connections between East and West, and we try to evolve these links at the federal level, but also at the regional level with all the political decision makers. We really do our best in order to evolve this hub. It is composed of 11 lines, and there's of course the big and the small Moscow ring. We're following a roadmap that has been planned until 2025. And in addition to the small Moscow ring, you see a photograph of a station. And in addition, we will develop other lines for the larger Moscow ring in order to shunt the freight railway traffic away from the city. And in order, of course, to improve impulses for passenger traffic. This is a very important task, because the city is right now really suffocating under traffic, and some of its districts need also better links, better transport links that are more efficient than they are right now. And this is why we try to supply these nodes from surrounding areas, and we try to provide incentives for the passengers to use these adjoining nodes. It's possible to reach the center of Moscow within 30 minutes from the surrounding suburbs with a certain level of comfort. Moscow ring, for example, uses 4-minute intervals. It's very much like a metropolitan railway, and is very popular. We transported 400 million people last year, and this year it's going to be 500 million. At least this is what we expect. The conditions, of course, are not easy in such a big city. We will very soon lay tracks for 330 kilometers of new lines. The high-speed trains are expanded, and this is a kind of substructure backbone for urban traffic that we're developing. And of course, we must make sure that passenger lines are kept separate from freight lines in order to avoid collisions, so to speak, because this is very important for our dynamic development. We've heard yesterday that railways are economically useful, ecological, and of course a very safe mean of transport, and there is no other means of transport that can really compete with us in this respect. Under certain constellations, it's perhaps possible, but as a global, overall, overarching concept, no. And this is why we're developing our railway infrastructure is harmoniously developed following both our own standards and the standards of the European Union. Now, if you look at the wide gauge tracks that we're using in Russia, well, there are some other countries that use this wide gauge. For example, Baltic states, partly also parts of Poland and Finland. So there are quite good perspectives, actually very good perspectives for cooperation in the future. And larger projects, such as the Moscow Transport Hub or the development of Eastern Transport and the Eastern Transport Complex, these projects are involved. And of course, these all projects all comprise a lot of innovations, also from the construction sector. And this is why we need to invest our money intelligently to make sure that the results will really keep a pace with modern developments. And we also, of course, want to incorporate, in addition to our own experiences, the Western experience, the experiences made in Western Europe, I'm sure, and I'm confident about excellent results in the future. Every construction site, every planning project means people. It means jobs. And of course, profit for the economy at large. Freight flows and traffic flows are constantly growing, and quite in a balanced way, both in Eastern and in Western Europe. So we could not say that raw materials are transported only from the east to the west. No. I think the constellation is more balanced than that. And I think it's going to remain like this. I think people have realized that railways are very, very future oriented and fit for the future. The point is we mustn't lose time. We need to conduct negotiations in order to increase safety. And we make sure that the standards are always complied with. I think in the future it will be easier and faster to work and to work together than it was the case in the future. The conditions are very good for a very positive and intensive development of railways over the coming decades, say. Also, modernization now costs less because the first important steps have already been taken. And again, we need to exchange experience. We need also Eastern-Western working groups within the context of the Russian railways. We also have a technology department, obviously, that looks at the technologies that we have in Russia that need to be implemented, the technological solutions also that we can adopt solutions from the West in order to avoid reinventing the wheel. Also on the basis of existing technological inventions, and such cooperations have already been started. There are joint ventures. We have a joint venture, for example, with a Swiss company, and also a working group with Czech colleagues. And entrepreneurs, too, are very active. Up to 200 or 100, 200 enterprises are sometimes present at our conferences. So this is, these represent a huge economic power. And a dialogue at this level, a high level, is, of course, a very productive act, a very productive approach. On this level, it is possible for us to overcome many barriers because we can really listen to people and take their solutions directly aboard. And we can discuss frame conditions for work. We are able to ensure a higher level of coordination. All this is very, very useful. Of course, all this needs to be implemented. The palace system, for example, has already been introduced, or the ballastless track superstructure technology with low vibration. All this is already being practically made use of. Of course, we had problems to overcome. We did. We did overcome them. What we need in our work, of course, is a very hands-on approach. And this, I think, is a good idea. For example, the BIM technology, building information model technology, in construction, this the intelligent, the smart construction side. This is, for example, something that we're already implementing. And projects that also take account of life cycle costs. These are projects that enable us to conduct our projects more efficiently. What's it all about? It's to save time in planning through new technologies. And of course, we're doing that. Digital transformation is, of course, and digitalization is, of course, a key objective. We want to make sure to we organize processes in a way that we can work solely on the basis of digital data in order to eliminate human error. Digitalization results in effectiveness, clarity, and directness. It's not just this is not just empty words, but rather a practical application that we are making use of. And I think in a couple of years it will be even more validated, and we will be more successful in resolving our joint tasks, tasks that individual enterprises are faced with. But I think that all this will help us in order to overcome obstacles and find concrete, customized solutions. I think this is very important. And I do believe and this is what I expect from this conference, that we will be able to develop global plans on the one hand, but also plan concrete steps that we can implement tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mr. Toni, thank you very much. So it was very inspiring to see the massive infrastructure work you're doing in and around Moscow region and Russia in the wider sense. I may welcome Frau Barbara Kolm, who works in the supervisory board of OeNB, and who will, I want to ask you want to start right now with your presentation, if that's okay?
Are there others that could be done before, or am I?
I asked the technique, if that works.
I don't have a presentation.
Exactly, so you can just start, and we are looking forward to listen to what you have to say. So I think we go for you. Just to introduce you, I mean, so you're taking a very macroeconomic view as well as political view, I assume. And since you work in the supervisory board of OeNB, so you also see how the railways in particular work. You will probably tell us a bit more about the requirement of government to invest in infrastructure, why it's necessary, and if it automatically takes positive effects to the macroeconomic and the social part. So we are very much looking forward to your speech. You can sit or you can stand as you prefer. And yeah, big welcome to Frau Dr. Kolm.
Well, thank you very much. How much time do I have?
You have maximum 10 minutes.
Okay, thanks. And I'm going to stand, it's easier. Okay, of course. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for running late slightly. I will, of course, not go into politics, into deep politics, but as an economist, and especially as an Austrian economist, which means we believe in supply-side economics, one views certain investment of government very critical. However, infrastructure is definitely something that we need to have a close eye on, and where there is a certain priority, not monopoly, of governments to invest. So I will briefly go through some effects that trigger growth, that trigger investment, and especially in infrastructure investment. So what effects do we see on a short notice, on a short term, and on a long term? Of course, on a short term, there is this infrastructure aggregate demand that we see, plus positive effects on employment, if investment is being taken or is undertaken by government and the public, by public entities. Of course, one always has to keep in mind that it is taxpayers' money that is being invested there, and eventually some people forget that it is. This is why it also needs to be invested wisely and, of course, efficiently and very transparent. Without further ado, I think transparency and compliance are all things that we all have incorporated, not only in our state-owned companies, but in all other companies, and that these things are a given, at least in our parts of the world that we are working in. So what kind of effects, positive effects on employment do we see? How big is the multiplicator, the so-called Keynesian multiplicator that we see if there is investment in infrastructure? The good news is the largest effect is, of course, in construction. And it's between 0.8 to 1.8%, however, depending on how you calculate it. In the long run, however, not in the short run. In the short run, we only see those effects, plus we see the effects on component suppliers. This is something that, especially in a small economy, is felt directly, such as in Austria, with all our supplying companies that work for the industry. The long-run effects can be seen in the general setup of the framework. So, how competitive is the business location? And these are those two effects that tie together the growth of our gross national product. So what is in the end the result for the business location? It increases the supply for goods, and this is the most positive effect for consumers. In the end, it's not only a give and take. Economics is not a zero-sum game, it's creation of added value. And this is what politics constantly has to keep in mind, the creation of added value. It's not taking from one side and giving to something to the other side. It's about rising up everybody. And this is, I think, the important news of supply-side economics, that we have to bring in also PPP models, that we have to bring in the private entities, and with them we can trigger innovation and we can create growth. So to look at the multiplicators again, the magnitude in terms if we inject money into infrastructure. The first one is, as I mentioned already, employment effect, not only on the local enterprises, but of course also for the foreign ones who import. The second part is where do those suppliers come from? Are they now investing in our own country? Will they bring in investment into Austria or other countries? This is very important. The third part is the disposition of the income. Not only the income of the enterprises, but the income of the individuals. Those people work in our enterprises. What can they do with how is their disposition of the income? Will they invest in our country, or will they also spend their money in consumption, example, in tourism or in buying foreign goods? The fourth point is the level of capacity or the rate of utilization of our own home products. This is very important for our own economy. And then finally, the method of application of credit investments. And this is a tool or something that is very important to us. We have always seen investment in infrastructure from the state to the state-owned companies. I think it's time now to look into other tools and methods of how we can invest and how we can trigger growth in the industry. And there I think innovation on the financial sector is a very important tool. And if we look at the new methods that have been implemented and the new tools that we've seen after the financial crisis, and maybe it's not the regular things that have been in place for a very long time, that provide opportunity and provide change as well. And I'm not talking about those international levels of guarantees that we see. I'm talking about financial products that will help, and of course, what finally is important for infrastructure investment. In some countries, it's of course economic recovery where we need infrastructure investment, but this is actually the demand side of economics. And as I said at the beginning, I'm a supply-sider. I believe in the proactive approach towards markets. So why do we need infrastructure, and why is there also this state component? It is because of the productivity elasticity, and this is what I mentioned before, is 0.18 to a max of 0.25. So the effects, the external effects, are comparatively low. However, given that infrastructure is a public good, especially in rails, we can neglect that. So what other importances or what other important reasons are there why we should invest as a government? Security, safety, long-time investments, guarantees, that it is run by a solid company that is also respects the rule of law. And those are characteristics that we need to consider when we discuss those things. Another important and empirical evidence is the increase in productivity via direct investments. So for an economy, for a developed economy, Western developed economy, there is no precondition that investments should be only made by the state. But it can, as I mentioned before. However, in underdeveloped economies, I think partnerships with state and industry are a precondition to continue the setup. And I'm just going to give you some numbers now on Austria and on the positive effects of the system rail, that as we call it in Austria. So the gross value added and the effects on employment because of the OeNB in Austria was growing, created a growth of 6.9%. the increase of transport from 2013 to 2017 was an increase in 11% of the entire volume. The total effects of employment just in one region of Austria was 100,000 per capita. The revenue streams were 8.19 billion. And the percentage of revenue to the entire value BIP in Austria, GDP, was 2.6%. So you can see the effects of the railway system is huge. Another number that is probably very interesting to many of you is how many times is a train circumventing the equator in Austrian train system, circumventing the equator per day. How often do you think? It's every 2 hours and 2 minutes. So you can think of how many trains are on our tracks and what they deliver. On the CO2 level, and kind of this is now the green side, because this is something that has long time been neglected, at least in our parts of the world. If we look at Austria, and if you have the map of Austria in your mind, the saving on CO2 expansion is the size of one province, which is called Vorarlberg, our utmost western province, which is substantial. So if we had trees grown on this entire province, this would be the amount of CO2 that we save via transport. And of course, the huge number of goods that are being delivered throughout Austria is tremendous. Investments. In Austria, the train system or the rail system is investing in the big projects that you all know of, Brenner Basistunnel, you all know Semmering Basistunnel, a couple of other huge projects, Kolm, etc. Then there are plenty of projects that are in planning, and what the current government and the current OeNB leadership is doing, they're investing in railway stations a lot to create more attractivity in the infrastructure. What is also seen is the share and ride system that is being improved, and that where we see internationally good examples that help us create best practices and added value. I would simply also add that the things like punctuality, and whether it's in goods and services, are increasing. Overall, the numbers of the Austrian rail system has. I have to congratulate our team, our management. They simply have done a great job, and I think they get an applause for that. They have improved the system over the past 10 years tremendously. And when we started, or when the current management started out 10 years ago, there were definitely lacks in the system, especially budget-wise. How can we finance the system? Of course, these goods have 50 years plus, and this is a huge difference in many other infrastructure goods that government invests in. Finally, some numbers. The amount of tracks is 4,800 kilometers. There is 25,000 signals. There is 1,070 stations and stops. There is 6,420 bridges, 250 tunnels, 3,200 crossings. We have 10 hydraulic energy producers, plus 8 terminals and 4,200 buildings. So this is just a system of the rails in Austria that needs to be maintained, that needs to be financed, and of course that needs to be invested in on a regular basis. And these are all things that not only the Austrian taxpayer, but via private-public partnerships and international partnerships, we can provide goods and services that are that create a positive trigger for our economy. And again, even though the effect, the Keynesian effect is not as high as we wished it to be, but it is an important service and good that we can deliver. And the technology and the new partnerships that we have seen and that have been discussed in the past days, yesterday, especially yesterday evening, is a new way, is a way forward towards how we can manage innovation, innovative processes, and how we can create added value for all players on the markets. And I would like to thank you and congratulate you once again on this great conference, and I hope you will come back to Vienna again with more ideas of cooperation, because after all, without cooperation and coordination, we will never ever be able to create growth and well-being for everybody. And this is what some of the Austrian Nobel laureates have told us, and we should take this to the next level. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mrs. Kolm. So you will soon have a presentation on the Russian infrastructure that may beat a little bit the numbers of tracks and the kilometers, but it's very impressive. I have to say that as we speak here, there are about 500 or 1,000 infrastructure investors meeting in Berlin exactly at the same time, looking for targets to invest also in the railways. And you see HS1 in the UK, which is funded through private investments. So there are definitely plenty of opportunities, and maybe it's time to bring those together and instead of being at different cities at the same time. Yeah, I work also in the financing, that's why it's a very interesting part. You have to.
Yeah. I was there at this conference yesterday on a panel with regards to how infrastructure can be financed for smart cities. So UN is focusing on the SDGs 11 and trying to bring and bridge the gap between the industry and policies makers and politics. And I think this is a very good way forward, especially if we include new ways of financing.
Absolutely. So I now welcome Mr. Sharapov, who is Deputy General Director of the Institute of Economy and Transport Development in Russia. He will present to us information about the Russian infrastructure development, taking a view at the macroeconomic side, but also at the technical side. And yeah, so you see that we go forth and back in terms of the region. Soon we will go to Korea and then to China. So we cover the whole rail connection that Austria is actually right in the center. So Mr. Sharapov, please, your presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will now go on where my colleague has left off. Mrs. Kolm. I would now like to evaluate the consequences and results in the development of major infrastructural objects. One such infrastructural project is what I'm now going to tell you about, the effects, the economic effects of a new railway line, Košice-Bratislava-Vienna. We are going to analyze this project, and the diagnosis will highlight the possibilities and meaningfulness of the construction of this railway link of 1,225 kilometers of broad gauge. And I would now like to do a very complex evaluation. We have a very complex macroeconomic and budget efficiency. With respect to the commercial evaluation, We are planning that by 2030 we will start operations, 19 billion tons, and up to 2050 we are planning an increase by 4 million to 23 million tons of annual turnover. This will account for 6.5 billion euro in 2017 prices. Different business models provide that we will have a yield of 4.3 to up to 9%. So everything is fine. The construction of the line will have a multiplier effect to neighboring and parallel industries, upstream and downstream industries, both at home and abroad. The macroeconomic analysis was done by Romberger, who then assessed the added value from the project in up and downstream industries. And the assessing companies have taken a very conservative approach. In any case, the purchasing power will be increased in the territories where the line will go through, and there will be a very strong demand that will also be created with a positive effect on the GDP development of the countries affected. When we come to the assessment of job creation, an indirect analysis was performed. 642,000 man-days will be generated. In addition, 338,000 man-years in Austria, 127, and in the Ukraine, 45,000 man-years of work. So the startup of operations will cover 2018 through 2063, and we are planning an additional GDP development, an additional GDP of 38,000 euro for this operative period of all countries concerned. With respect to the budgetary side, you can see on this transparency that for the Russian Federation, this project also has a positive effect, which is very interesting. And the CEO of the Russian Railways is warmly supporting this endeavor. The budget means have been provided in the central budget for both direct and indirect participants in transit, where Russia is a transit country. 6 billion euro have been reserved in the central budget. Here we have the next transparency, assessing the social consequences, the social added value. Infrastructure projects for railways, of course, are positive, with a positive effect on the social side or social aspects, increasing security and safety, improving the environmental situation over other means of transport. Now, travel time, of course, is also cut, which is also very important for the population. what was important in the technical planning with respect to the planned infrastructure projects, we have 4.2 billion euro in added value and 2.8 billion of this figure are projects that can be saved by saving time. Further billions are gained from the reduction of CO2 emissions. Together with AXA, we have performed calculations that point out further increases in efficiency. And all in all, these effects will amount to 0.7 billion euro. Now, the effect on the reliability of good flows accounts for 35 billion euro. We cooperated with specialists from many different areas, both from our institute and Axela, a great company, carrying out scientific seminars, signing a memorandum, and making lots of plans for the future. In this transparency, we can see the microeconomic and macroeconomic positive results, and the general positive assessment after considering all these factors is more than 14 billion euro. I would like to close by saying that in accordance with the Austrian Viennese Institute of Economic Comparative Analysis, the White Gorge line Bratislava-Vienna will have very positive economic effects. GDP will increase by 3%, so that will be additional GDP yield. 2 million man-years over a 10-year period. 8% of all sales will be achieved. All interested parties will be consolidated in the development of this train line, including the construction of this new railway line. And that will definitely greatly benefit the economic development of Austria, Slovakia, Russia, and the Ukraine. Thank you very much for your attention.
Now, we are now moving to the other side of the world, to Korea. Mr. Jang, coming from the banking industry, having worked for Hyundai, is now the representative of the Korea Cooperation Research Institute. He flew in here just for the conference, so we are very pleased to have you here to hear your thoughts about your part of the world. I have to say that whilst I'm not a big fan of North Korea politically, but at least their leader is using rolling stock, using the train all the time. So he's a big promoter for train travel, and hopefully political leaders can meet by train in the future wherever they want to meet, on the landmass, of course, not under the Atlantic.
Okay, thank you. Dear distinguished guests and participants, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude for inviting me at this Congress today. I'd like to share the events taking place around the Korean Peninsula based on my experience of participating in Hyundai Group's inter-Korean economic cooperation projects in North Korea. Next. No. Ouch. Okay. This one, October? Yeah. Well, I need this slide. No slide? There's one satellite image. Satellite image elaborately portrays the present situation that the Korean Peninsula is facing. Since the separation of 1948, the conflicting situation has continued for over 70 years, including the Korean War. And South Korea has become an island, while North Korea looks like a black hole. The difficult situation continues even on to this day. The Eurasia Railway line is also cut off from this black hole. I need a black hole satellite image, but there's no image. Okay. Following the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics and the multiple summits last year, anticipation of a new peace paradigm have grown in the peninsula. However, after the second Hanoi summit, the political landscape of the Korean Peninsula is once again becoming unpredictable. If the dialogue between US and North Korea were to disconnect, then there exists high probability of another tension-driven situation as it was in 2017. The Korean people firmly believe that another war should never take place within the Korean Peninsula. The most concerning aspect on the future of the Korean Peninsula is that mutual distrust among the stakeholders towards the North Korea nuclear issue is deep-seated. In my personal opinions, sanction and pressure with no dialogue would make matters more difficult. In order to achieve denuclearization and a lasting peace regime, we first need to build up a trusted relationship. For this, we need to repeatedly go through the cycle of dialogue, negotiation, commitment, and execution. Since last year, 4 summits between China and North Korea have almost fully restored the level of broad alliance they once enjoyed. The two Koreas have had 3 summits during crucial phases and was able to establish a significant trusted relationship. However, for US-North Korea, building a trusted relationship does not look easy. This is due to the fact that there were incidents where numerous negotiations and promises were not kept. Now, for building a new trusted relationship, the trust build-up cycle should be repeated with additional follow-on summits between Trump and Kim Jong-un. Distinguished guests, next I would like to share issues on economic prospects on the Korean Peninsula. I need a slide about the Jang Ju-young, but Chairman Jang Ju-young, former chairman of Hyundai Group, in 1998, Chairman Jang drove a herd of cows past the DMZ and met with the leader Kim Jong-il, and in November he started the Mountain tourism project. By 2003, 2 corridors were opened from what was once an impenetrable DMZ to Mount Kumgang and Kaesong. And the Kaesong Industrial Complex development soon started. Also, following the railway connection ceremony of 2007, there was high anticipation of Trans-Korean Railway and Trans-China, Trans-Siberian Railway being connected all the way to Europe. Until 2008, more than 1.9 million tourists visited Mount Kumgang in North Korea. Kaesong Industrial Complex project has created 53,000 workplaces for North Korean employees by 120 South Korean companies until 2016. Moreover, thanks to Hyundai's economic cooperation, the nuclear and the missile crisis did not lead to radical outcomes. Even when there were 2 cases of military conflict in the West Sea on 1999 and 2002, Mountain Kumgang tour, cruise boat continued on it in the East Sea. When I was working for Hyundai Group, I was keenly interested in the railway line from Seoul to Mountain Kumgang in North Korea, as there are large demand for visiting Mountain Kumgang. The PPP business model with two governments and private entities could be very profitable. Since 2012, North Korean economy has been steadily recovering despite the economic sanctions. After the latter half of 2017, not to ignore the rapid decline of foreign trade due to strengthened economic sanctions, major key economic indexes such as commodity prices and exchange rates still remained stable. Contrary to popular belief that North Korea may achieve rapid economic development following reform open economic strategy like China and Vietnam, I have a different view. I believe it is most probable that they will regulate the pace of the market reform in a progressive and systematic manner, as rapid reform may result in regime destabilization threats. As such, with denuclearization, peaceful regime, and progressive market liberalization, there will be significant business opportunities in infrastructure construction, including logistics and transportation, as well as underground resources development in North Korea. Although the international society seems keenly interested about North Korea's railway upgrade project, there will be a high possibility for overheated competition among concerning states. China and Russia have already invested in road and railway and logistics companies. Korea is also picking up speed in the inter-Korean railway connection project, and Japan will participate in the competition based on its large-scale funding capability. I think North Korea's railway connection and upgrade project must be a multinational cooperative project between European states and Northeastern nations. Chairman Jang played an important role in building trust relationship between South and North Korean political leaders through business. Like Chairman Jang of Hyundai Group, I hope that International Railway Congress can act as a bridge work that connects Europe, East Asia Railway. Finally, as I am optimistic about the prospects for the U.S.-North Korea negotiations, I am looking forward to coming to Vienna next year by train. Thank you.
I guess this is what we wanted to hear. And I'm welcoming now Mr. Simon Fletcher, who is the coordinator for Europe at the UIC, which stands for International Union of Railways. Simon has a history of 40 years in the railways, as you can see. He looks younger than he is. What does that mean? He knows a lot about UK, European, but also international railways as such. He comes from the operational side and safety side. It's about standards and harmonization of standards so that things work in more than one country. Simon, so you have to catch up a little bit on timing, and I'm sure you will, even though you're a very interesting person to listen to. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Markus. That's really a challenge, ladies and gentlemen, for a Brit speaking in his own language. So I will try not to be too quick in what I go through. But what I'd like to do is to just to offer a few ideas, a few thoughts, a few observations about the development of rail infrastructure And it's clear that the railway sector is evolving. We've heard a lot of that this morning already. But is the pace fast enough? Some would say it's too quick and that the sector actually is not able to cope. Others would say that the pace of change is not quick enough and that the rail transport is losing market opportunities to the road and aviation sectors. Somewhere in all of that, of course, is the happy median that we need to reach. And far from being slow starters in this so-called digital revolution that we've heard so much about, the railway sector has been making regular progress, in actual fact, in innovating the railway system, with developments that move the system from a mechanical to solid state signalling, remote monitoring of assets, automatic train protection, much lighter and faster weight trains, interactive passenger information systems and so on. The railway system of today is a lot different to what it was a decade ago. Of course, there will be commentators that will suggest that even that is very slow progress when one looks at the pace of innovation in other sectors. So what is it that makes rail different? Well, one has to start, of course, with the life cycle of the assets that rail manages, and of course the cost versus benefit ratio that needs to be calculated in order that investment decisions can be justifiably taken. Rail has some very large fixed assets like the track bed, bridges, tunnels, stations and so on, notwithstanding, of course, the rolling stock. And all of that needs to work together via a series of very critical interfaces in order for the railway system to be safe and efficient. Innovation in rail, therefore, needs to be about collaboration and collaborative forward thinking, forward planning, identifying which assets need to be changed and taking account of the technological evolution along the way. We have to be realistic, however. It has to be done in a cost-effective manner that takes account of the affordability factor for the stakeholders involved, and it has to be realistic. It must be done within the capabilities of the suppliers to supply enough of the right equipment at the right time, the infrastructure managers to be able to fit it to the railway itself, and of course the railway undertakings to fit the equipment, the necessary equipment, to the rolling stock. And we mustn't forget that the personnel of the railway undertakings and the infrastructure managers have to be properly trained, and all of that whilst at the same time trying to keep the trains running, costs controlled, and customers satisfied. How then do we seize this opportunity that such collaborative evolution offers? Digitalisation, of course, provides the sector with a series of opportunities that is today and must continue to embrace with both hands. With rail being a system that must remain whole and integral, the focus must be on collaboratively harnessing the transformative, some would say disruptive technologies that are being either developed within the railway sector or, and we mustn't overlook this as an opportunity, can be adapted from other sectors. There is a strong need to be focusing on these technologies that will drive down cost so that secondary lines, for example, can continue to serve the maximum population. And that makes taking the train, taking the train more attractive to the customer, and also makes maintaining it, the system, cost effective. In many cases, the capacity is there, and what needs to be done is to harness that capacity and to start to sweat the assets. Make them do the job for which they were built. Looking forward, and you'll be delighted, Markus, to know that I'm coming to the conclusion here, so I think I've caught up a little bit. We've got a mechanism known as shifter rail now in Europe, which is an excellent vehicle for tackling some of the topics that I've just referred to. But that that vehicle will only really ever be able to scratch the surface. We, as my colleague Francis Bedell yesterday highlighted, have created the UIC digital platform, and that is setting out to embrace a number of very good practices within the sector and to share that with as many stakeholders as we can. You remember the byword, the phrase of share, open and connect. It's also encouraging SMEs and startups because that is where an awful lot of the thinking and the passion about the development of the system is going to emerge from. It's not old fuddy-duddies like me, it's the new younger people who are coming through with the bright ideas. A team of companies from the railway operating community have developed a series of capabilities. That word is constantly coming through with the messages that you're hearing this morning. And now these are being further developed. They have already been firmly embedded in the Shift to Rail programme, and they are forming a red line right through the Railway Technical Strategy Europe, which we have recently reproduced or republished. I have a copy here if anybody's interested in seeing me afterwards. It'll take some folding material to put in my pocket, of course, but never mind. And the railway sector think tank, ERAC, has also produced its vision of where research and innovation needs to head. And of course, one of the principal concepts in all of that is about infrastructure and about smart cities. The time is now to take the initiative, use the catalyst being generated by Shift to Rail, and develop a programme of innovation that is encouraging the best ideas to come forward. And which will create a rail revolution. Somebody said this morning about the railway, or maybe it was yesterday, about the railway becoming again the favoured transportation mode. And that's what we need to encourage a real shift if that is going to become the case. Only then will we see a significant reduction of congestion in our towns and cities, as the train really starts to take the mobility strain in Europe. Thank you.
Simon, very kind. Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation, very time efficient. Unfortunately, I have to take the audience back to another part of the world, to China, fortunately, unfortunately, meaning we have to go, you know, in our mindset along this fantastic route from Korea all the way to the UK. And before we go back to Austria. So I asked Dr. Li, who works at the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China here in Austria now since recently, to give some insights about your perspective from the Chinese infrastructure development, maybe reaching out into Europe. What are your plans and how you're funding it as being a banker? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fröhlich, and good morning, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Very delighted to attend this Congress, and during this 2 days meeting, every party has a warm discussion and speech and express to build up some more efficient and smart international railway network. And for ICBC, we're newer in the Austrian market. And for Belt and Road, China is an initiator. And so as a bank, what could ICBC can contribute our unique value to the international railway network? And here I would like to speak to 3 points. The first is on the funding challenge within skill synergy capability. The railway transport construction project needs sufficient funding support and highly well currency and interest management. So the construction usually involves several countries with different currencies. And for ICBC, we are the biggest commercial bank in the world in terms of capital and asset. So we can we already established a presence of global network covering 47 countries and regions. So while performance and operation of these entities improve that, ICBC has obtained sufficient business experience, which means we made regularly interaction with the different parties, market participants, i.e. the issuers, the investors, and the arrangers. So in the meanwhile, as a regular mandate and book runner of syndication loans, ICBC has also very broad and in-depth market know-how. The loan volumes of our primary market in the overseas market has reached rapid growth, which reached 185 billion US dollar of total contract size in 2018 for nearly 210 cases. And the average loan maturity stands at about 3 years and 9 months, which average participated amount to be 400 billion US dollar per case. So in China, ICBC ranks #1 for over 800 billion renminbi on booking for many years. And ICBC also has established a global syndication platform within ICBC Group for asset transactions dealt between brother institutions. The average time of each transaction is 13 days. That is very quick response speed. And the transaction volume in 2018 is up to 60 billion euro. So we have confidence to supply our clients to have a quick response and deal speed. And for the construction finance arrangement, it also needs several financial institutions, not only bank, but also insurance companies for solving or debt insurance, private funding companies, asset management companies for investment and restructure. So different types of institutions need the synergy and mutual support and well-organized working led by the arranger. And in this area, the key and the security for infrastructure project implemental, that is very important. So the second point I would like to speak is funding ability on the market should finally go to the infrastructure projects, that is the product synergy. So the funding facility for the project in nature is not quite enough. So aiming to protect the project with proper and sufficient funding support, we need to properly use the instrument of suitable facility products, even tailor-made for a single deal. For example, I would like to give some 3 examples for the financial products just for the infrastructure areas. One is the project loan to the borrower. We can provide local and overseas borrowers project loan, especially used for the purpose of purchase and construction for fixed assets. Booking agent bank are ordered to credit the funding to the borrower and transfer to the beneficial account directly. That is so important for the borrower and the contractor, the every parties. That is second. The product is a buyer credit loan. We could directly credit into the constructor as a payment from buyer, which could ensure funding go to the product. For example, if such as CCECC takes part in the project, and ICBC could provide buyer credit loan covered by Sinashore with the favorite price to the buyer and credit the funding into CCECCs for its construction purpose. Yeah, that is a buyer credit loan. And the third product, such as FEPC loan to constructor. So we can also provide loan directly to the constructor for its material purchase, labor role, loan preparation. And so the product called FEPC can ensure the funding finally be used into the project. So the bank usually can ensure the funding usage if it uses the proper product and finance structure. So in this area, ICBC has the full confidence to service our clients, not only in China, but the global client. And the third point, I would like to see the ICBC Austria as a regional headquarters and our unique competition. The main target of ICBC Austria is to contribute to Austrian society and economy, and also will extend to CEE region, that is, ICBC's internal strategic. The ICBC Austria plans to take advantage of the function of business relationship center and to continue to establish new subsidiary or branch through the ICBC Austria, this platform. With regard to the infrastructure and industry investment, we find that countries in Central and Eastern Europe has great demand for development, which is our major market for developing international capability cooperation. For here, I also would like to share some of the figures, such as the project reserve of ICBC along the Belt and Road Initiative has reached over $200 billion. Besides, the whole project reserve of ICBC under the going out policy around the world has reached over $400 billion, and 50 billion lies in Europe. So the big portion of projects are infrastructure projects. And in the field of railway project, ICBC also had the rich experience in the banking service from project loan, cash management, derivative, and settlement as well. Over 50 billion euro outstanding loan for the railway project ranked #1 in the global market. So here I also would like to see the China Railway Company is also the biggest borrower in ICBC in China. So we really hope, based on our full experience, and we will be very open-minded to speak to our local companies, including OeNB. Before we also kept a very good contact with the OeNB, such as OeNB, the local clients, and the other countries' clients, and we have the confidence to serve these companies. And ICBC Austria will pay effort to improve the mode of fund cooperation, and we will explore ways of involving commercial funds and cooperation with Austria or even European Union on policy funds to carry out joint investment or construction in CE regions. We could recommend and select Chinese companies related with high quality, rich experience, and railway construction industries to carry out integration and cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Li. So I wish that European banks would promote European money in China as much as you promote Chinese money in Europe, because you did that in a very professional manner. And we need to be aware that, I mean, you have a tremendous liquidity that you want to spend on infrastructure. And I guess that, we are a little bit behind here in certain areas from a European point of view, but let's discuss it at a different panel. I would now like to move our second panelists. They are going really into the to-do phase in terms of building the bridge between 1520 and 1435 millimeters. Mr. Gschnitzer, he works at OeNB Infrastructure. He's in charge for building the connection here in Austria. He was a project manager for the major railway station in Vienna, which works, built on time. I don't know if against budget, but at least it works. And so he is a real hero, and we should definitely learn from him. But let's see what you have to say on the connection. Please.
Thank you very much. I want to talk about the project now to connect the 1520 gauge with the 1435. And we started the SEA process, the Strategic Environmental Assessment, at mid of November last year. And on the first map, I want to show you how these railway systems fit together. You see in the white colors the European standard gauge you all know this in Europe, and on the other side you know it all from the Russian side, the 1520 railway system. And you see that here in Vienna we have the connection between three 10T axes, where we have the Rhine-Danube corridor, the Baltic-Adriatic corridor, and the Middle East corridor, and they meet in Vienna. And so we have the perfect point to connect these two railway systems here in the middle of Europe. You see on the left side of the map, in Spain we have a different track, 1668, and in the European Union, 1520 railway technology is common. You see it here on the map in all the Baltic states and also in Finland. We want to connect these both railway systems perfectly in the Twin City region, Bratislava, Vienna, to make transport more efficient and much faster. So, we here in the city of Vienna have the possibilities to connect in future the European railway system with the 1520 system with a new line in broad gauge technology through the Republic of Slovakia. Mr. Oleg, Toni and Mr. Sharapov told about our project some facts for our feasibility study. We did it together with all the cost estimations, and we had very fruitful discussions to make this new line able and to find the best solutions to find a way between the mountains, the rivers, and all the tunnels and bridges we have to build or will have to build to connect these two railway systems in the middle of Europe. Next, I want to show you the increase of TEUs between Europe and China. You see in 2016 we had about 140,000 TEUs, and it will grow up to 800,000 TEUs in 2030. Yesterday at the presentations you saw similar facts. So we had a lot of sources, and all sources say the same. We have to expect a lot of TEU transport between Europe and Asia. Now, the facts from our project, you have heard some of these figures, but I want to focus on the single track. It's a single track for freight transport. We will connect this with two terminals, one in the nearby Vienna and the second one in the Republic of Slovakia near Nové Zámky. And we will start to operate in about 15 years, and we try to speed up to get all the authority procedures in both countries. And I can tell you we are on a good way in Austria and in Slovakia to get our first permits as soon as possible. The investment of 6.5 billion euro was already told. Now, I think it's a very interesting picture to show how this should work. On the one side, we have the 1520 trains from the east with a length about 1,000 meters. On the other hand, we have the European tracks with trains with a length from 700 meters. And we want to shift the TUs from one system to the other with 70% on track to track. It's a new system. We want to keep the containers on the track and not from track to road, from rail to road. Only 30% of the goods will be transported further with trucks. And that's necessary because our terminal will be in the middle of the Twin City region. And we have about 12 million consumers in this region. They need a lot of goods that are transported in both directions. Track-to-track station, environmentally friendly transport of goods will be in future, we hope so, more on rail than on road. And we have all the economic effects and all the value-added location for Austria with the generations of jobs in both countries, in Austria and in Slovakia. It's very important to see that we are able to shorten the time between China and Europe in transport for goods. Today we need about 35 days to have transport with ships between these both continents. On track we will save time up to 15 days. Perhaps we will reach 12 days. We will hurry up in technology in both countries and both systems to connect these countries on the land route much faster than is possible today. Last year we had a train from China to Vienna. It needed about 14 days for a length from 10,000 kilometers from Chengdu to Vienna terminal. So we see the train is cheaper than air transport. The train route is more economic friendly than any other transport, and I think that's the future for transport on tracks with our systems. Now a slide where we see how transport is done worldwide and how is the relation between transport volumes and CO2 emission. You see we have only 5% on the freight volume worldwide on rail systems, and we have a CO2 percentage from 2.2%. You see other possibilities of transport with roads or ships, and you see we have the best ratio between freight volume and CO2 emission. And so we see that managing climate change means to go by train. And we see that train transport is one of the possible solutions for CO2 reductions in future. The other presentations had the same content. I want to move forward because we had a little to speed up. Here I want to show the increasing volume from transport from Europe to China. It's not only on the one way that we get goods from China, but on the other way, it was possible in the last 10 years that the ratio between export and import raised from 1 to 3 to 1 to 2. It's a very important fact that we hope that it will be possible to have the trains on both sides full. Not only in one direction, that we had in both directions full trains with our TUs between Europe and Asia. The job generation, we see that we will generate jobs in Austria and in Slovakia. We see that we have the value added. Mr. Sharapov reported it already, and we see a very big possibilities for the regional impact, about 450 million in the Twin City region for the locations of this terminal. So we did the feasibility study together. To start with a traffic study, we followed the technical study and then the economic studies, and now we started the processes in Slovakia and in Austria, and now we can see the system of our strategic environmental assessment. Here we see the 310T corridors in Austria. The light blue is the Rhine-Danube corridor, the black-blue in the Baltic-Adriatic Sea, and the brown one is the Middle East corridor. And the important thing is that we have now the connection between our two countries with the system, and we hope that we can get the high performance declaration at the end of this year. Just now we are working on the environmental report that will be on the internet in Austria and in Slovakia. We work together with the ministries of Slovakia and Austria, and it's how important that we also involve the Hungarian ministry about our project to have all partners together to make it ready to be able to start our construction work as soon as possible. So we see that we hope at the end of next year we have the high performance declaration, and then we start to find out the route and fix the location for the terminals in Austria and Slovakia. And in 2025 we hope we have all construction permits to be able to start in about 8 years the construction phase, and about 2030, 33 we'll want to open our terminal. So thank you for your attention and good luck for everybody.
A real project. Unfortunately, we still have to wait a couple of years before we can really use it, but nevertheless, you know, the direction is clear. I now welcome Mr. Harder, who is the CEO of Molinari Rail. You heard yesterday Mr. Michele Molinari connecting the Pacific and the Atlantic. Let's see what you are going to connect, most likely European technological standards. So we are looking forward to your presentation before we go into the coffee break, which is good news too. Please.
Yes, good morning everybody. I think all the presentations and speeches today in the morning showed one thing. We are in a wonderful time. We are in the renaissance of the railway system. We are attractive to financing, we are attractive to customers, freight forwarders, we are attractive to passengers. So I think this is very important to be clear about that, because I think some decades ago everybody said we have aviation, we have road transport, so forget about the railways, we don't need it anymore, we have more modern systems to be used. I think this we see throughout the world, not only in Russia. We see it in Europe, where a unified transport landscape is established, and we see it throughout all of the continents. Michele spoke yesterday about Latin America. I will focus today on Africa a little bit, but I think for us all it should be a privilege, but it's also a responsibility to shape the sustainable transport landscape of tomorrow for the future generations, and this we should work on. So next slide, please, because I don't have the sticker. Okay, thank you. So all the requirements from the market is also giving pressure to our, let's say, industrial setup. We had very segmented markets and we had very segmented suppliers. Working on rolling stock, working on infrastructure, working on operations, working on maintenance. So most customers did it themselves. And nowadays we see that we have integrated railway systems. And this is especially for us one transformation of our strategy, where we were rolling stock based starting here in Austria, also with our setup in Schwarz, which are, let's say, the remains of Jenbacher Werke, and we are working from this competence center. But we see more and more that in the European industry, let's say, turnkey suppliers and integrators are fading, so the place is empty, and others like Turkish, like Chinese integrator are coming and entering the market, and especially here we have the possibility to enter and to really deliver full service and full solutions to the market. So let me skip about the railway operations. We have different aspects, different DNAs which are coming on the railway system, on the operation. Financing is an issue, so it's not anymore the comfortable customer who is investing all the money and we have just to deliver as an industry. No, we have to find new solutions, new approaches to help the customers of today. I think on Košice Vienna, it was a lot of talked. I think interoperability between 1520, 1435 must be kept, and I congratulate all the teams from Slovakia, Austria, and Russia, and all the participating for the big step. And I think it's an important step forward to really have the connection up to Vienna of the 1520 network. What is about the transportation? Of course, it's all about goods and passengers, and we have to take the decisions. We have to educate the operators. We have to educate the nations and the regions sometimes. What is the most important decision factors to make a transport system? How accessible is to have the best, let's say, effect from the railway system? So what I want to talk about is our project where we are participating in Ethiopia, and this is also a very good benchmark case or showcase for the Austrian-Swiss cooperation, because here, together with the main contractor from Turkey, we realized a system, a new railway system in Ethiopia directly. And it's all about the effects we have macroeconomically, but we have also for an industry set up in such countries. And we should not forget CO2 and environmental protection is not only played in Europe, it's played all over the globe. And also if we look at migration, we have to increase the standard of life in the countries people migrate from to change the world setup of tomorrow. So what's the project about? It's a 420 kilometer section, very central between Avaş and Vedia. And what we constructed there, because the main challenge was, of course, the financing. And it was a deal of the finance deal of, I think, 2015-16 for Africa. And this was a combination of Turkish, Scandinavian, Austrian, Swiss export credit agency, really to make a club deal together with the banks and to enable our industry to deliver and to set up a modern system within Africa. And as you perhaps are not aware all about, Africa is a very rapid growing rail network and building corridors, not only talking about but really doing it and reviving the railway system of tomorrow. So I know we are up to the pub and coffee break, so I want to close saying I think we have a good vision and we should collaborate. And I thank also Oleg, Toni for our cooperation in SAS, where we try to develop not only in Russia but also internationally. And thank you for the speeches. And that's from me. Thanks.
I don't want to make too long closing remarks. I mean, I think here is a community of people that are all interested in the same thing, is to improve people's life in this generation and the next generation by building fit-for-purpose transport systems. We are all rail people, so we are using the aircraft because we have to, but we wouldn't mind traveling like the North Korean leader sometimes for important business meetings if we could. It's our job to make him come to Vienna by train for, you know, in a smooth ride in less than 14 days if possible. And I wish everyone here a fantastic conference and to continue with this very efficient format in order to meet next year and talk about progress and the new challenges. Warm welcome again to, or farewell to the panel. At this stage, a little applause, and then I think you can have a nice coffee break. Thank you.